Have you ever had the experience of sitting in a wedding and watching this beautiful couple walk to the altar, hearing the soaring music and thinking about the meaning of their vows? And then maybe in the quiet of that evening, you've wondered, I wonder how long that marriage is really going to last. Or have you had a neighbor come by and say, our family is starting to dissolve, we're getting a divorce? It's very painful, isn't it? This is one of the things we're talking about today on This Life.
This week I was traveling on the plane, and I have my new iPad, as you all have seen, and I love to read books on the plane. And now you don't even have to, what do you say, apologize for it. So I'm reading away. And there's this woman kind of cuddled up toward the window. And I just felt that I ought to say, you know, how are you doing? Where are you going? And she told me where she was going. She was all excited. And then she said that she was going on a trip because she was going through a divorce. And I told her I was sorry and everything. But what she said next is what surprised me. She said, the really sad part is he was my very best friend and partner for the first 10 years. She said, we were just the happiest couple. And I said, well, what happened? And she said, what happened is that we had children. And he felt that the children came between me and him, and it just went downhill from there until we just could not get along anymore. It was very, very sad to hear.
Very sad, very sad. Something I came across recently was this, I guess, a phenomenon of couples who get divorced and still live together to raise their children. You know, and it's interesting. It's like you're no longer married, but we're choosing to live in the same home for the sake of the children. So that is something I came across last week that I found very interesting.
Last week I was talking to some students at the university, and we were talking about marriage, and one of them said, oh, we're getting married soon, and I said, oh, there's this really fabulous book you ought to read, and I probably shouldn't have said that. Unwanted advice, but I said, there's this great book by Gus Napier, and it's called The Fragile Bond. And she looked at me and she said, is it that fragile?
Oh my goodness.
And she said, I think maybe that'll come later. And and I thought, oh dear, I've scared this poor thing off. But it was very, she had entered into this engagement with real trepidation, and she was afraid it was going to collapse because of her family's, marriages collapsing in her family.
You know, I think it's important today to really share with people the resources that are out there to help prepare you for marriage, and divorce is, according to statistics, it seems like every other person is getting a divorce, but before you get married, I think it's a good time to really do some reading and some preparation.
Well, and your idea, Barbara, or the book's idea is that it's a fragile bond. It is a fragile bond.
It is a fragile bond.
I think we take it for granted. I know, I've heard people say, well, I know he'll never divorce me. So in other words, I'll do what I need to do because I know that will never happen. Well, there's no way to know.
Well, and people don't get a divorce externally, but they've divorced each other in their hearts long before. And you can see them sitting in restaurants, glum, not talking to each other, nothing to say, irritated, sitting a foot apart in church.
I once said to Gordon at a restaurant, I said, please start talking to me immediately or someone's going to look at us and think that it's not a good relationship.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I want to share with you ladies a case today. Sam and Ashley have been married for 9 years. They are both professionals who are very successful. Sam told Ashley a month ago that he wants a divorce. Ashley is stunned because she thought everything was going well with their marriage. Sam says he doesn't love Ashley anymore and now realizes that he made a mistake in asking her to be his wife and staying in the marriage for so long. Sam told Ashley that he's been having an affair with the wife of his business partner, Robert. Robert has called Ashley and told her that he doesn't want a divorce from his wife because of their 2 children. Ashley is angry and confused because she wants their marriage to work.
You know what just popped into my mind is this funny commercial right now about it. Does it really take 2 to tango? And you see 3
Yes.
people trying to dance at the
together.
same time.
Yes.
Hilarious.
Yes. I've
In
seen
this
it.
situation, it's not hilarious, but how can you do what 2 people are supposed to do when there's a third person interjected?
You can't.
Okay.
Well, and there's so much wrong with this. It's hard to know where to begin. I mean, I think about the first one. The first part that shocked me is where you said Ashley is stunned. Is she really? It says here she thought everything was going well. It's always amazing to me how people can come to the place of looking at divorce when one of them thought everything was going well. Do they really think it was going well, or did they just not want to confront the fact that they were lonely or whatever?
I wonder if some people are aware. And if you think about it, in this case, let's see, do they have children? Doesn't
No.
say
Doesn't say.
that they have
Doesn't.
children. But if you're a mother and you've got children and responsibilities
That's
in the
true.
household, you know, you're happy that you can say hello and goodbye at the beginning and the close of the day to your spouse, and that you can keep up with everything and all the demands, maybe a job outside of the home, plus
Right.
childcare, plus the
Right.
house. And I wonder if people are really aware. Maybe it just gets past them. Maybe we know that, you know, marital satisfaction takes a real hit during childbearing years
Right.
because you have no time.
So you're saying it could be possible that a couple, they're not happy, or that things aren't maybe perfect, but they're not aware that they're that bad.
Or they might say, well, this is just what happens when you have kids.
Right.
We're just struggling along like anybody else.
Interesting though, Carla, when you said her Ashley being stunned is surprising. What about those couples who lead lives where they don't really spend the time to have the deep conversations and the deep reflections, and they are more like roommates
Yes.
than they are spouses?
Yes.
You know, so that might be what it is. They go to work, they come home, they do things on the weekend, they go out with friends, they hang out, but maybe they're not doing things that are didn't do things that built their relationship and continue to find out more about each other as they were growing. It's been 9 years.
Right.
And she seems to be knocked off her feet,
Right.
you know, the idea. And he's been having an affair with somebody at his job. Where did he find the time? I'm wondering.
Well, also, I've asked some people, you know, they talk about being stunned. And I say, really, was there no hint of this whatsoever? And sometimes they'll say, well, actually, there were hints along the way. I just didn't want to believe them. How
I've
much
heard
I've
that
heard
too.
that.
Yeah.
There were little hints, but I just didn't want to believe it.
So, what do here we have Robert and Ashley. Now, here's interesting, the third person, Robert, the husband of the woman.
The fourth person.
The fourth person who's now called Ashley to talk to her about the fact that his wife is leaving with her husband.
I'm all confused.
Maybe he should be talking to his wife about that, not to her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I'm also shocked by what Sam suggests, that he not only does he not love her anymore, he realizes that he made a mistake. I mean, that hits at the very core of
who
a
you are.
person.
That's dirty.
It feels dirty. Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
That's not
For
nice.
a partner to
Yes.
say, not only do I not love you anymore, it was a mistake to ever walk down the aisle with you. But I'd like to just spend a moment on that. I have seen many couples, friends or people that I knew, that said that they felt like they shouldn't even walk down the aisle, but they did it anyway. And that's a scary, you know, and I'll say, why? Well, the invitations were sent out. Everybody was,
Yep.
you know, how could we go back at that point?
And could we take this opportunity to tell our viewing audience it is never too late to say
It
no?
is never
Up
too
to the
late.
morning
It
of.
is not.
Up
Show
till
up to
the
church
moment you
and
say, I
thank
do.
you all for coming. We're not having a wedding today. Let's go eat some of the food that we prepared.
That's
You
right.
know, because it's not worth it. For the pain
worth it.
that you cause each other and cause other people, when you have a sense in yourself, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Trust that. You know, trust it. I wish I could take out billboards and just put it up. Trust
Yes,
your gut.
that's right.
Don't feel pressured. Don't worry about how much money was spent. You're gonna have to pay it off at some point. It's okay if you don't go through the process. But then to turn around and hear those awful words.
Right.
But I think also some people, when they start getting in straight places and they can't work out their issues, then they start rewriting history, don't you?
Yes.
And what
Yes.
they told these glowing, almost fairy tale stories of how they finally met, and the first kiss, and you know, the first baby, and how idyllic their home life was. And then something happened, and they got in a tangle, and then they start looking back and say, well, you know, it was really not so good anyway. It was just rough.
Well,
It was hard.
and that's what I would say to couples, that there are times when you look back where people look back and say, I never should have married this person. But I would suggest it's never appropriate to ever say that to them. I mean, do you think? I mean, if you're
That's
not
right.
going to
You
stay
ca-
together, just
You can't
part.
take that back.
No.
And it
Yeah.
has such an impact on the
It does.
marriage.
Yeah.
And it almost feels mean.
Yes.
It's this sense of finality, because usually when the person who says, I should have never married you, they've already resolved all of their issues,
Yes.
their worries, their concerns. They've already
Yes.
made it in their minds.
And
I'm
it
out, I'm
negates
done.
everything.
Yes.
It negates the children you had
Yes.
together. It
Yes.
negates the positive moments that you
Yes.
did.
Yes.
Well, it puts
Spend together.
the other spouse in a conflict, because if
Yes.
you love that person, then you'd want them to be happy, and you say, well, then what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to try harder to be whatever it is that you want me to be, which puts them in a one-down position that takes away all their power in the
Absolutely.
relationship? Or do I just let you go because I want you to be happy? So it's a no-win situation for that
For the
person
other
that hears that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How awful.
But this thing of having an affair, though, I mean, which you mentioned, Dilys, once there's an affair going on, does Ashley have a chance? I mean, that's the question here, isn't it?
You know, that is a valid question. Because the relationship is something that's happening on the job, I mean, I think in a marriage where there's an affair has occurred, that it can still be redeemed. I mean, I think it can. You know, it takes two willing people, though, to
And not
sit.
everyone can recover from
And
it,
not
but there are
everyone.
those that
But
do.
there are those that can, you know, so.
Can we sit on that just for a second? Not, you said, Barbara, not everyone
I
can
don't think
recover
everyone
from
has the emotional strength to
I
tolerate that.
agree.
And I think some
Or
people
to heal from it.
Or to heal. Maybe they don't
Right.
have enough of an emotional reserve to take that. Or maybe their life is just so difficult for them in so many other ways, or there have been so many egregious acts along the way that this is the last.
The last straw.
Yeah, and I think that there are times when it's very difficult to make that go.
And I would also add to it that the term affair now doesn't just apply to someone, you know, having a sexual relationship with someone else. People are having emotional affairs. They're texting each other. They're sexting each other. They're having conversations with people
On
who
the
are not their
internet.
spouses on the internet, and they're not doing that. So when whatever the form of the affair is, you know, you're right. Some people can't recover from that. And is it usually one time that it happens? You know, this affair has been going on. She didn't say for how long. But here it is that her husband is having an affair with someone on his job, and she missed it completely. Didn't have a clue, didn't have an idea, you know, that something was going on.
You know, I think a lot of times that people who, the non-offending spouse might say, I want to make this work. I want to do everything possible. So I'm going to forgive you. And let's just keep going as though this never happened. And I would just want to say very clearly that's the worst thing you can do.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
that's a guarantee that it will happen again.
Yes.
Even though they might experience grace and, you know, but I think people have to be held accountable for their behavior, and they have to demonstrate that they understand why they did this, what the downfall was, what the motives were, how their behavior needs to change, how they need to build their relationship now.
again,
I think there are so many things that have to happen. But to start that process and to have someone goading you and a partner to keep you accountable, I think is the way to make this happen.
Well, and a difficult thing that's happened here to Ashley is that Robert has contacted her. She has the least amount of control in one way, that she's not the offending partner. She wants the marriage to work, and for Robert to call her and say that he also wants his marriage to work, it puts both of them actually in a
What is she
difficult
supposed to
situation. What
do?
is she supposed to do with that information? Oh, good for you. I'm glad you wanted
Yeah.
to work. Me, too, you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, there's some email questions here. I have noticed quite a few people getting divorced after only 3 years of marriage. I thought 7 years was when people often ended their relationships. Is this a new trend? Well, we've heard about the 7-year itch. Yeah. What about that, the 3-year?
Well, I think 3 years has become the time
The
when
new
people
7-year
the new
itch.
7-year itch.
Wow.
You
Why
know.
is that?
I'm not sure. I think some of the things that I've heard, anecdotally, people will say, "I didn't know the person." Especially marriages, the young marriages, the younger ones who've gotten like married right out of college or right out of high school or halfway through college. They finish that first degree, they're working on their second degree. It's like, wow, I don't think I really knew what I was getting into.
Yeah.
I really didn't know the person.
I rushed.
I rushed. I should have waited a little bit. So some of the things that I've heard as well.
I don't know if this is true, but it seems like the rumors about and the expectations about marriage never change, which is amazing to me. You would think that through the years, people would begin to say, okay, now I realize that marriage is tough. But it seems like every new generation that comes along, they have the same high expectations of marriage that they did in the previous generation, and now even more so with all of the romantic movies that are
I was
showing.
just going to reference
Yeah.
that because people who enjoy watching those have worse outcomes in their marriages than any other group. And it's because it looks like it's easy. It looks like it doesn't take work. It looks like there's no communication, that if you have sex together and you have some stunning physical moments together, then everything is going to fall into place. And we know that's not right.
I have an interesting statistic here. About 38% of all couples divorce within 4 years of marriage.
38%.
38%.
Wow.
And this probably represents, for many, a breakdown in the marriage and separation within the first 2 years.
Wow.
So that was recent statistics.
Well, that whole phenomenon of limerence, that when you see each other, firecrackers are going off and you're all excited and it's very exciting. And when that happens, it's like, oh, I think I could be married to this person forever. But then after a while, maybe 18 months to 2 years, then you start realizing, well, this is kind of hard, isn't it? And usually they can give it their best for another year. Maybe that's one of the things that makes it all
To say
kind
to
of
them
fall
that marriage is difficult, are you suggesting that people would say that to them right in the front? Or
well, that it's
in the
not as
beginning?
glossy and easy.
Right.
It's work, just like any relationship is work. It's not like the movies.
Who should tell them that?
Well, I wish we had this. I wish we had more university and college and high school courses like Life
Yes.
101
Yes.
that talked about
Yes.
relationships and marriage
agree.
and childbearing
I
and
agree.
getting insurance and
But Barbara,
all of
I
these
had
life
one of
things.
those. I had one of those, and you hear it, you study it, you read a paragraph that says it's going to be difficult, but still, when it comes time to walking down the aisle, you don't believe it.
Well, who's going to believe a book? But if you have people coming in and sitting down and
right.
talking, looking at kids and saying, "Let me tell you what happened,"
See, I
that's
think
different.
that
It
I
is.
agree with you, and I also think it would be really important for parents to let their difficulties show more.
Yes.
To
you
talk
know,
about
to talk
them.
about them.
Inappropriate ways.
Yes, inappropriate
And
ways.
the other piece is premarital counseling.
Yes.
It's something that I think no one should say I do before they go sit with someone.
I agree.
Do some assessments, look at each other, take off let the limerence go, take off all the rose-colored glasses, and really say, look, guys, what you're gonna do, it's a choice, and talk about the stages of marriage. I mean, there's so much information out there now. No one should just get married willy-nilly. I think it's foolish. To
Okay,
do
here's
that.
are you ready for
Yes, I'm
difficult?
ready.
Okay. Here's a question that so many people have. I'm a religious person. Is divorce wrong?
Who wants to take the hit for answering that?
I asked the question. It's yours.
So she jumped to it.
The Bible does give allowance for divorce,
It
and it
does.
says that God hates divorce, and
That's
I've started to understand why, because it's so painful
It is.
for so
Yes.
many people.
Well, and it misrepresents God.
It misrepresents
if
the
anything
loving-
is supposed to represent God, it's marriage,
marriage.
and our relationship with our children, and that is a love that will not let you go. And so divorce is not in God's design because it misrepresents Him.
And to respond to that, I think a lot of things in our lives today are not the way life was
Right.
supposed to
To
be.
be.
It's not the original plan.
Another
So-
statistic I found.
Yeah.
A Dallas divorce lawyer has said that 5 years after divorce, many clients have told him, if I'd only known how hard divorce is, I would have tried harder
Yes.
the first time.
I've
Yes.
heard that from a lot of people.
You know, so
Okay, so one thing we have is that it's not only difficult to be married, it's difficult to get a divorce and to
yes,
be divorced.
Yes.
Let's go back to the question of whether it's right or wrong.
Well,
Or-
I don't know. I think we answered that. It is not God's plan for us as a people of faith to say, as a religious person, it's not his desire for you to get a divorce. It's not his plan. It doesn't reflect who he is.
Nice, okay.
However, you know, people get divorced. You know, and I think one of the things that that religious people struggle with, why they're struggling with this whole idea of divorce, is sometimes they've not thought it through before they even got married. You know, you're not thinking about, well, divorce is a part of life. It's something that can happen. So if I want to please God, maybe before I say I do, I need to really sit down and do some homework and some reflection. Now, that being said, what about the person who marries the man or the woman who seemed like everything was okay and you did your work and your homework and your background check, and then this spouse is cheating on you?
Yeah. Or beating you
or
up.
beating you up. I mean, cheating, the Bible gives you God gives you an out for that. If you know, he'd rather you stay. But if this person is a philanderer and continues to cheat on you, then absolutely. It doesn't please him, but you have an out. But for the person who is physically abusing you, threatening your life, abusing your children, you know, at some point as a spouse, you have to make a decision about, do you stay in this marriage?
Well, I would even say they don't have to be getting bruised and beaten up. That continual verbal abuse, that's not God's will for any of us to live with that.
Absolutely.
But I think that people need to exhaust every avenue they can to either facilitate change in themselves or to facilitate change in the relationship. And if those efforts are met with a brick wall every single time, that's data. Then you have to do something about that, because you don't want your children to grow up seeing this and thinking it's normal.
And that normal means it's okay for you to then
That's right.
repeat the very same thing
That's right.
that I've gone through.
There's another email question. My husband and I are not getting along. How bad does a relationship need to get before a couple should divorce?
Well, they're just not getting along. I mean, what does
Well,
that
that's
mean?
pretty miserable, though. I mean, have you ever tried to live with someone you just don't get along with? You know,
Oh,
that's
my goodness.
tough. Have you ever
No, I
taken a
haven't.
trip with someone you just couldn't get along with? And it's like 10 days or 10 years.
Oh, I remember someone who wasn't getting along with someone else on the trip, and I thought that would do me in.
Yeah, it would drive you batty. Wow.
But you know, that's the place that children are in right there, is having to watch it. So how bad does it have to get?
Boy, these are tough questions. I can understand why people are struggling with
That's
it.
why I ran to ask the questions.
That's what I'm saying. You just
I
wanna-
get what you're doing. here.
Yes, we catch on to you. I think it goes back to what Barbara just said, though. You know, divorce should be the end, the very, very end. After you've exhausted, you know, let's go sit and talk with somebody. Let's go see a counselor. Let's really look at what exactly it is. Am I pushing your buttons? What, you know, let's really
Right.
get to the root of what's really bad, because I don't know what really bad is.
I think what's difficult, though, and I think we've all seen this, is where it gets so bad that someone is almost bitter, and where they almost can't back up. And sometimes I've heard friends or people talk about where they are in the relationship, how frustrated they are, and I say, well, have you talked to your spouse? Well, not yet. Not yet? It's like the house has burned down and someone is saying, should I call someone about the fire? Well, you mean for the embers? Or what are we talking about here?
Right.
And why do you think people wait so long before they...
Because they say they already know. Because that's the other thing. I've said it 100 times. Surely he knows. Surely she knows. I've said it over and over and over again. How many ways must I tell them? Whatever.
That I'm unhappy,
That I'm
or
unhappy.
that-
And so instead of talking, they go, "Ah, I'm done. I've had it up." So then it keeps building and keeps building and keeps building. What I found interesting, though, and I don't have a statistic to prove it, women tend to, very general, have expectations of our spouses, and because we've already said it once, we think they should have gotten it. So we're holding over them. We're angry because they're not changing. We're angry because they're not doing anything, and it builds up and it gets bad. It gets bad. And when you speak to the spouse, they go, I didn't know you were still upset about that. Or if you just told me, I would have done it. Well, I told you. Well, I didn't know.
Well, I think men do that. I think men have that experience too sometimes. You know, I've certainly seen that with, you know, going both directions. That's just a painful thing. And I think that after you're so angry with someone, you're not going to go to a vulnerable place and say, you know what it is? It's that when you say this, it takes me to this painful thing, and I can't bear it. And I just think it's a more difficult level of work to do at that point.
To wait until
it's really gotten to be huge. And it takes on a life of its own. And then you've usually told people, and you've got this grievance story, and you know, you see people and they say, well, what did he say to that? Well, what are you going to do now?
There's a little rule I think that really helps, is for people to say that they won't talk about the past. They'll only talk about the present. And it takes a lot to get to the place where you're only talking about the present. But if you keep it there, then you don't have all this
Long
stuff
list.
building up. But how many people coming in to talk about divorce have never talked about all that stuff in the past? And so every present has got a whole
big
past
history
behind it.
sitting on top of that current event. And there's no way to resolve that.
Everyone says you don't really know a person until after you're married to them. Is this what causes couples to get divorced early? And wouldn't they do well to live together for a while first?
Actually, no.
No.
And what I'm saying no to is the statistics indicate that people who cohabit actually have a more difficult time maintaining a marriage. Than
And that was substantiated by one of my hairstylists who I asked, they had lived together for a long time, and she said then they got married. And I said, and so were there surprises? She said, yes. The minute I said I do, she said it was a very different world, and I never would have expected that.
Wow. That is
surprising,
profound.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So there's a period of getting to know people ahead, and then there's some things you just can't know until after you're married. Well, we've talked a lot about divorce. We've talked about its difficulties. We've talked about how hard it is to save things to the end to talk about. We've talked about the complexity of how problems can present themselves, and that's all the time we have today on This Life. Thank you for watching.